And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 54, the Adam McQuaid episode. One of the most lovable, likable, toughest Bruins there was. Number 54, Adam McQuaid. That is today's episode. I'm Evan Marinofsky, alongside Conor Ryan of Boston Sports Journal. Conor, how we doing?
Evan, very tired, but I'm doing well.
Did anything happen on Wednesday? Were there a lot of moves made? I don't remember anything happening on Wednesday in the NHL world.
No, I don't think so. No, I just didn't sleep well.
No, just tough night of insomnia.
Yeah.
That's
No.
tough.
I actually watched. I watched Signs. Then my Shyamalan movie. It frightened me, so I was up late a little bit. But
Well, there you go.
Persevere day to day. What are you gonna do?
That's tough. Not much happened. This is not. What are we talking about? We're gonna spend 30 minutes talking about nothing. We're just gonna be like
And
the
my
COVID
Shyamalan
episodes?
movies.
Yes.
Yeah, there's the M Night episode.
Yes. Anyways, there's quite a bit to talk about. Free agency was Wednesday, and boy, well, I mean, it didn't disappoint in the sense that it was very entertaining around the league. I mean, Philip Grubauer being taken by the Kraken, that was very out of left field. Dougie Hamilton going to the Devils. There were no big moves by the Bruins, except in net, which we'll get to. But I had to write out a chart of all the additions and subtractions and question marks the Bruins had, just to go over things for people who maybe aren't caught up, and we can kind of start from square one. The Bruins, the day before, on Tuesday, re-signed Mike Riley, 3 years, $3 million. Then they started off free agency by signing Derek Forbort to 3 years, $3 million, left shot defenseman. They signed Eric Haula, $2.375 million per year, and that's 2 years, correct?
2 years. Yep.
Haula's 2 years. Thomas Nosek, 2 years, $1.75 million per. Nick Foligno, 2 years, $3.8 million per. And then Linus Ullmark, 4 years. Linus Ullmark, 4 years, $5 million, and that's in net. Subtractions, they lost Sean Corrali to the Columbus Blue Jackets. He gets to go home. Best of luck to him. Probably Nick Ritchie. I know Kevin Paul Dupont had said that he was coming back. But then I believe it was Larry Brooks reported that Nick Ritchie
were looking at him.
Yeah, he looked to be someone that the Bruins were definitely going to keep, and then didn't. And then lost Dan Vladar as well. Best of luck to him out in Calgary for a 3rd round pick. And then the two big question marks: David Krejci and Tuukka Rask. And the Bruins currently, after yesterday, have what, about $1.8 million in cap space, according to Cap Friendly.
Yes.
Which on days like yesterday, Cap Friendly is as real an MVP as there is.
The GOAT. Yes,
GOAT.
absolutely.
As good as it gets. So there's a lot to take from this. We will try to break it all down here. And I think a lot of people are having trouble making sense of all of this. You know, the Bruins added a bunch of players, a lot of depth pieces, basically a starting goalie. People are there's a lot of question marks here. And I think we'll start with this, because I know we both agree on this. There's two scenarios. There's two lenses to look at yesterday in. There's if Krejci returns, and there's if Krejci doesn't return. And in one scenario, it's really good. And in one scenario, it's really up in the air.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's tough to do a full grade or gauge this offseason right now, just because there's so many, pieces up in the air, right? You look at, it's kind of like you watching a Christopher Nolan movie, and halfway through it just gets cut, and the person's like, what do you think of it? Be like, oh, fuck it. I haven't seen the second half of it. I don't know what to gauge it on. That's kind of how you have to view it right now, because if you're going in, if David Krejci returns and they have to move cap, or he signs a value deal. Granted, I don't think a value deal is 1.5 million. I think they're gonna have to move a cap anyway, right? But if he signs for 3.5, 4 million, if they able to get him to do that, and he's your 2C, then you're looking pretty good. Have they moved the needle enough that people are getting the duck boats ready? No, I think you have to have a lot of stuff work in your favor. I think they've improved in areas they needed to, especially in that bottom six, where Foligno and Haula and Nosek and all those guys will contribute. But if David Krejci is not there in the middle, one, I'm curious as to why you spent the money to keep Taylor Hall, because I don't think Taylor Hall signed here with the expectation of having a center by committee kind of be the guy that's driving offense on his line. So yeah, it all depends, I think, on whether or not Krejci comes back, because if he's back and the pieces fall where they may in that bottom six, and you've got Foligno and Coyle and Howla and Jake DeBrusk is in that mix too. I imagine if they have to clear out cap, he could be the first one to go, which curious to see what the return would be. I don't know if that would be a straight cap dump or if it's you package him with other players to move, like a John Moore contract or what have you, try to get, cap flexibility plus an impact player back.
Arizona's very nice in the winter.
Yes. So yeah, there's plenty of options that they can go with in terms of freeing up cap and moving some contracts out. It's not like they're locked in right now, nor I think people have to be aware that the Bruins, I think, can go 10% over the salary cap limit during the offseason. So they could sign Krejci right now to like a $4 million deal. It's not like the NHL's cap auditors are going to come and just fight Don Sweeney right now. You don't have to do it until the regular season starts. So they have some wiggle room there.
It's like in the movies when someone gets kidnapped, they walk in with a thing, they put it right over DeBrusk's head and pull him out.
Yeah, exactly.
He's gone.
Yeah. So you look at this how they handle this offseason, and is it, the moves people were expecting? No, I think you look at that defense might be a big question mark in terms of whether it's the right personnel, with Grzelcyk and Riley as potential, top four guys. Is Derek Forbort the equalizer that you need? Because I think we've talked multiple times about they need at least two guys out there and need to get bigger guys. Granted, the market for defensemen seemed pretty brutal. I mean, you already didn't have Alexiak was off the market. Martinez stayed in Vegas. You look at Ryan Suter, who, he's getting paid a boatload of money from Minnesota, is still chasing money in term at his age, which best of luck to you, Ryan, whatever.
Credit.
So, what do you
Kudos.
You can't do much if you're the Bruins. So it's a bit of a tough situation in that regard. You don't know if even a guy like Ekholm is going to get moved, considering Nashville traded Ryan Ellis already. So you have to make do with what you have. So they're better defense than they were before, but still some question marks there. So again, have they improved? I think so. There's a lot of, moving parts. If Krejci's back, if he's back in the fold by this time next week, and they've moved, DeBrusk or what have you for cap relief and or maybe a player, then I think the complexion changes that this team, even with, the situation in net, addressed areas they needed to address. But if we're going into camp and we're doing a story of, is it going to be Charlie Coyle or is it going to be Jack Studnicka at 2C, then you're in trouble. Or Nick Foligno. Nick Foligno, if he's your 2C, not great for a team in a win now window, right? However, if he's a third line, winger who's able to, provide offense in a spot of the line you didn't get much from last year, pretty good. So it all, again, hinges on what Krejci ends up doing.
I look at yesterday in 3 segments. Obviously, you have offense, defense, and in net. Duh. But I think on defense, it's the most cookie cutter. They improved, but it's not enough, right? You have the same top 4 you had last year, which it needs to be better. You added Forbort to most likely that third pairing, which I think Forbort was an overpay, but you needed that. 6'4", 220, can kill penalties, plays tough minutes. I think he'll be better than he was in Winnipeg. You needed him. You needed a guy like that. You got him. Kudos. You improved in that regard. I would say Forbort's probably better than Lozon. So you improved, but you need to improve more on D. So top 4, I don't know what they're going to do for that. Those guys are off the market. They really were never quite on the market for top 4 left shot defense. But I mean, you just, as you said, Alexiak, Martinez, and Suter, all 3 were going to be very tough to lock down. So that's going to have to come via trade. Offensively, though, you mentioned it. Sweeney mentioned on Wednesday, center by committee if Krejci doesn't return. That's scary. I also think it's interesting. He wants Frederick down the middle. So you would assume Frederick would probably start off as maybe the 4th line center. I think yesterday, as much as it speaks to needing an injection of proven depth, right? That's kind of why the Bruins have had postseason struggles the past few years. Is when it comes to these big moments, when the top line isn't producing, or even the second line, the 3rd and 4th lines need to come up big. And last year in the postseason, or this past season, it definitely didn't happen. Year before, it didn't happen. Against the Blues, it had a tough time happening. It kind of speaks a little bit to their maybe not so confident in Studnicka, because again, Studnicka was kind of touted as, last year he started out on the top 6. I know it was a winger, but he's always been kind of like, oh, he's, the future top 6 centerman. And yesterday they get Hala, who's a center, Foligno, who can play center. You have Coyle, you have Frederick, maybe even Krejci. Where's Studnicka in this mix? I know obviously no one's really talking about it because it's Studnicka. He hasn't really made an impact on the roster yet, but we were told for so long that this was a big chip. This guy was going to be, top 6 center. I don't know where he fits in any of this. And I'm just curious, and I know you feel the same way with if Krejci's gone, where do people slot in? I mean, I would assume Coyle's the second center or the second line center. So then is your third line Studnicka? Is it Hala? I mean, you're paying Hala or Foligno to potentially be that. I'm just like, it's mind blowing what this lineup could look like next season.
Yeah, no, again, there's so many pieces that haven't been said. And that's not even looking at DeBrusk, right? Of like, even if, Krejci doesn't return and these guys move up, like, is he still a guy that the Bruins want to roll with next year? If he's, your third line, left wing, I think he's still due for a bounce back season, but, is it better value moving him for an asset or getting some money back? I think Krejci's back. I think he's most likely gone. I don't know where else you have a tradable asset there, unless you're also, if you're lumping, Studnicka in that mix and making, a bigger package to acquire a guy, then maybe that changes the complexion of things. But in terms of Studnicka, yeah, and in terms of maybe some of these other younger players, I think it's tough to map out a set ideology, right? Because you would think that in this win now window where they've also have signed a Foligno, a Howla, these veteran guys, that it's like, all right, we saw what happened with the youth movement last year. We went with Zaboral and Lozon and Studnicka. Didn't work. And it did not gel at all with our win now window. So you'd imagine this year it'd be the same thing or be the opposite of, we're not doing a youth movement. If a guy like Frederick sticks, he sticks, but we're not going into the year entering training camp with, Studnicka at the top of the depth chart in a key spot in the lineup. So that would seem to mesh with what these signings were, but also what happens if Krejci's not here? Like, Krejci's the ultimate determinant of just how legit they can go in terms of trying to go for it with this veteran heavy group now. Because if he's not there and Studnicka is your 3C or he's in a key spot like that, in a key part of the lineup, right? Like, you're not spending, these couple $1 million on that third line to have a rookie that you don't know can fit that role be the driver there, right? So, yeah, it's tough to kind of map out a set game plan. I think we generally know what the course that they charted out was, and that they're trying to go for it. They're trying to round out depth. They're trying to have, versatility and adding these guys to the mix. But if Krejci's not there as kind of that key cog you need at the second line, then it all kind of falls apart, right? You're missing like a key foundation that you're leaving the whole rest of the lineup construction unstable. Because can Coyle bump up to 2C? I mean, he can. He's a center. But is he what you want right now? And especially in this win now window, even if he's, well, let's say he bounces back and his, the knee injury he had and the surgery he had back to 100%. And he's a Coyle that we saw, in 2018, 19, the first half of 2020, that'd be great. But is he still a 2C, right? Like, what's Charlie Coyle at his best, 45 points, probably, right? It's a very good 3C, but if that's your option there for a guy in the middle that's going to drive and get the most out of a second line that you need to produce with Taylor Hall and Craig Smith, it's kind of scary. And again, you also, is Jack Studnicka's a 2C. A lot of risk there. And again, I don't think Taylor Hall will be that thrilled about it, right? So it doesn't, whatever option you look at, if Krejci's not back, it doesn't mesh with the layout and the plan that they have for going for it this year. So it all is going to depend on David Krejci. And again, who knows? Maybe they have a deal, they're working on it and they're just, trying to move up cap first. Because I'd imagine they'd rather move the cap space right now, just because, let's say they sign Krejci to a $4 million deal and they're over the cap right now. You lose some leverage in terms of moving a guy like DeBrusk because teams know that you need to free up the cap space. So they could be waiting just to move those moves before signing a guy like Krejci. But that's what you hope is a scenario, because if it's not, and they're literally just on hold, as like David Krejci's like chilling in the Czech Republic or down in South Carolina, That's not good. You would think
No.
this would be something they would handle right away. And if he's not back, then the outlook of this season and kind of this window gets dour very quickly.
I think you're screwed if Krejci doesn't return. Because again, I don't know. I know.
Shorter way to put it, but very, very blunt but effective.
Yes, I think you're screwed. I do. I don't know. I mean, Coyle is your best bet as the 2C if he's gone, but it's not really proven. There's a lot of question marks going into training camp. Safe to say it's not a safe bet if Krejci doesn't return. It's funny. As all this was happening on Wednesday, I was supposed to go to the Sox game Tuesday night, but it got postponed to the next day for 2:00. And I debated on not going because I'm like, well, there's going to be a lot of moves happening. But then I was like, well, my seats are really good and I paid enough for these. It's a beautiful day. I'm going. I don't care. And I went with a friend. And on the way, yes. And I'm sitting the whole game updating Twitter, all this stuff. And then as I'm driving home, as Ullmark is getting signed and stuff, obviously I can't look at my phone and drive, as everyone should know.
Yes.
So my friend was sitting there reading everything, all the tweet, what people were saying, what the deal was, what everything like that. And I'm sitting there just dying to say something about it or see things for myself, but took the safe route. So we hit on defense a little bit, and I think Forbort fills a need. A little bit of an overpay though. Still need to get that top 4 defenseman. But I think maybe the most interesting thing that happened yesterday was it feels like this team has moved on from Rask in a sense. Ullmark at 4 years times 5 million per. That's not backup money. That's not, a temporary answer. That is a long-term solution in net. And I think this left a lot of people kind of like, what? Moving on from Rask is one thing, but when you have Swayman there, so Swayman is obviously in the fold. He needs obviously more time. We all agree that Swayman needs more time to prove himself and to kind of get ready for consistent NHL action. But what did you make of the Linus Ullmark deal? What were your initial reactions to that?
Yeah, probably a little bit surprised at what the term and the payout was. I think when it got announced, it took a while for the term and the actual details to come out. So
didn't the Buffalo News say that Buffalo offered him like 5 times 25? I think. Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. But I think it was, Friedman, I want to say, was the first one who had just the straight, Ullmark to Boston. So first reaction is like, oh, not bad. They're clearly, they're either, gearing up for a legitimate guy to be kind of that stopgap, or, they're, thinking maybe Rask is going to be out longer term, or if he's back at all. So you sign him and you're like, all right, you pair him with Swayman. That's a very good insurance, policy, because as we've said multiple times, you don't want to have a Kata hot situation on your hands and a rookie that really struggles in an extended role. Then the term comes out and it's 4 years, $5 million. You're like, this isn't even starter money of a guy in a short term. This is a guy you're committing to at that kind of contract. So in terms of, how, if it works out, I think you look at the grand scheme of things and just how these things are mapped out. I really don't have that much of a problem with it, because I think at the very least, it covers all the bases of a situation in net where you've got, it's like a choose your own adventure book. And there's about 400 different ways that it can go haywire if you pick the wrong hallway to take or what have you. Whether it be, Swayman and Vladar struggling, if Vladar was here and they went with them, them struggling in an extended role. They didn't have much of a backup scenario, a spot where, Tuukka Rask either is still injured or he decides to retire, and all of a sudden you're screwed, going into the postseason. All these kind of different scenarios that you run through. Having a guy in Ullmark there who isn't just a journeyman. They didn't sign a Craig Anderson or what have you, of just a body to be there that has played an NHL game as insurance. They've got a guy in Ullmark who, you kind of look at his numbers. It kind of reminds me a lot about the Bruins thinking when they signed Jaro Halak in 2018, because people forget, as good as Halak was, especially in that first year in Boston, his numbers the year before with the Islanders were not that great. I think he had a 906 save percentage. And again, you kind of looked at his numbers and the underlying stats. They looked pretty good. The problem is you had, the pre-Trotz Islanders defense in front of him, which was pretty dog shit. Horrible. So you look at Ullmark last year, and for him to put up a 917 save percentage with the Sabres with that defense, when Rasmus Ristolainen is your number one option back there, holy shit. So I think you look at the opportunity the Bruins had one, you've got a guy in Ullmark who, I mean, who knows, man? Like, even if Swayman is, struggles a bit, or even if he's solid, you've got another guy you pair with him in Ullmark who could have his value really maximized in this role when he's got a competent defense in front of him and a solid structure that Bruce Cassidy has. This could be a guy that could take another big step forward for this team. And if you sign him to a deal like this, where he's still only 27, $5 million against the cap, but if he's a guy that all of a sudden has like a 9.24 save percentage, in the season, looks pretty good. And in that case, you either can decide on Rask later, and maybe he comes back healthy for the playoff run, and you've got a good tandem with those two together, and you get Swayman more time down in Providence, or it's a situation where maybe Ullmark and Swayman are lights out, and you don't have to even revisit the Rask situation, whether it's finding the cap space or just the situation of juggling those guys in net. So I think initial reaction, I'm fine with it, because I think Ullmark, one, has a lot more to give, and two, it pretty much covers any situation you have, right? Whether it's a rookie struggling, Rask not coming back, Rask, if he does show up, it's one of those good problems to have, right? It's not like it's something the Bruins would be dreading over, especially I think you looked at how last year ended, where you pretty much were nervous to go with Jeremy Swayman in that role with that depleted defense in front of you. You had an injured Rask. Sweeney kind of more or less mentioned that, they could very well go into the postseason now with a legit tandem if it's Ullmark and a healthy Rask in the postseason. A lot of teams would love to have that happen. A lot of teams would love that situation. And Swayman, who at that point in the season either could be on a roll, or he could, be taking the struggles that are expected from a young goalie in that spot. So I think however you look at it, I think the Bruins still did a good job of identifying a guy that not only is just a solid NHLer, but a guy that I think has a lot more room to grow and a higher ceiling that maybe people don't realize, considering the numbers he put up in Buffalo.
Also, I think the other thing that some people are critics of this deal, and again, the money does seem high, but I think the critics are saying, oh my God, even if Rask doesn't return, is Ullmark going to be starting over Swayman? Is Swayman going to be a backup for 4 years? And I think the answer is no. They platooned Rask and Halak, no issue, when Rask was making $7 million a year. They had no problem doing that. Why would they have a problem platooning Ullmark at $5 million, who's a goalie who's had some injury history, and you platoon with Swayman and Ullmark? There's no real starter. There's no real backup. It's a 1A, 1B kind of scenario. Whoever takes the 1A, whoever takes 1B is completely, hard to guess at this point, because Swayman was on such a roll last year. Ullmark's also very, very good. So I think it's fine. Like, I think and that helps you. It does feel though like Rask probably wouldn't return unless there's an issue, unless one of them slumps or gets injured or whatever it is. It feels like Rask is done. But I will say this. Sweeney mentioned yesterday he talked to Rask, and Rask kind of gave the okay for Ullmark. This probably won't happen. But, in my thought of thoughts, the conspiracy theory part of your brain, the part of your brain that's always there. It's kind of like, maybe this could happen. You almost wonder if they're going to use the time that Rask is on the shelf to kind of let Swayman grow into his own, as they would like to, play really, really well. And then when Rask is ready to come back in January, February, you have Ullmark and Swayman gunning it. What's right around that time? The trade deadline. Trade deadline's right around that time. Rask comes back. They sign Rask to, I don't know whatever deal they've signed him to, and they pair him with Ullmark. And then you got Swayman, and he's playing really well. And you're going to throw him down in Providence? You're really going to do that? Ullmark's under contract for 3 more years. Who knows what Rask is under? You can always sign a regular backup. You wonder if they might trade Swayman, because at this point, Swayman is their number 1 young prospect. He's completely surpassed Stanika on the depth chart in terms of the prospect pool. He's their number 1 guy. If you could trade Swayman for a lot of things right now, and if he plays really well this upcoming year, you could trade him for even more. And I wonder if they would ever consider doing that, whether it be for a Jack Eichel when his no movement clause kicks in, or for a top 4 left shot defenseman, because that feels like it's going to be tough to maybe trade for right now. I'm just kind of curious if that would ever be something they do, because that's a big move. but there's part of me that's like, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably further down on the list of how I think ideally they like to keep Swayman. But again, I think signing Ullmark gives you that option though that you probably didn't have before, where it was either Swayman or Vladar, or you sign a journeyman. Like that was not going to be part of the plan. If you're coming into a guy like Ullmark, you can either, again, it opens up a whole new level of options you have, where you can either roll with him for the foreseeable future as your number one. You have him as an insurance for Swayman as he kind of develops and builds his foundation as the eventual franchise goalie that you hope he becomes. It opens the door to have him be, a guy like Swayman to be potentially used as a trade chip. If, again, as you said, if he looks like a premier number one goalie, I probably would move him. But if you need that last push to get over the cup, and you've got a top six guy or a legit number one defenseman on the market or what have you, maybe that changes, and that wouldn't be an option if you didn't have a guy like Ullmark in net, who's hopefully at that point playing very well. So I think when you look at it, like most offseason moves and like most of this offseason for the Bruins as a whole, about 500 different moving parts with it, that it's tough to like build like a consensus, like one sentence, like summing up how like their goaltending situation or the decor or the bottom sixes. But I think when you look at it, considering how, tough it was to gauge what to even expect from that goaltending core going into this year as of 24 hours ago, you at least have some stability there and you have options, which I think, considering how, potentially destabilizing it could be to, in a win now window, lose your franchise goalie for, if not most of the year, maybe he's done. The fact that you now have a guy like Ullmark in net to be, paired with a guy like Swayman, you at least have some stability there, which, I think you go into the season, I think the number one concern is still Krejci and then probably the defense. The fact that I think goaltending for me is still third on the list of, concerns, or what you don't really know that much about, is a testament to the fact that they at least have an option back there that they can kind of rely on, hopefully, in Ullmark. So, again, tough to gauge right now what it's going to look like by training camp, but you're still in a better spot than I think a lot of people thought they were going to be as soon as the news dropped back in June that Rask was going to be out for 5-6 months.
To me, going from Rask, Halak to Ullmark, Swayman feels like an upgrade, because again, you're saving money against the cap as well. You're not paying as much. Last year they were paying what, about $10 million in net. At the current moment, it's what, $5 million plus Swayman making. Is Swayman under $1 million, or he's over $1 million now, right?
I'm trying to think of how it kicks in once they're.
So even then, if it's
he's not making a lot of money though.
Yeah. So if it's $6 million, you're saving $4 million, and you have two younger guys in net. Swayman, very high upside. So to me, in some ways, that's an upgrade. So again, I know there are a lot of people who are saying, Wednesday was a complete failure. It was awful. There's a lot of people saying it was great. I think it's tough. The dust has yet to settle, but on first glance, I do think that at least defensively, they upgraded a little bit. Should have upgraded more. In net, they upgraded. Offensively, that's still very murky. It's hard to, again, with the Krejci stuff, as we've discussed, it's very hard to kind of pin that down. And it does feel like DeBrusk will get traded. Maybe even gets traded even if Krejci doesn't get to come back, because there's still a lot of pieces in that bottom six. And I think they still would like some cap space. So I'm curious if that happens. I wonder what his value is. Like I do wonder what his value would be if can you get a second round pick for him? Could you get a third? Can you get a legit NHL player in return? I don't know. Again, if it's a cap dump, I don't know how you're, maybe DeBrusk and more for a pick. I don't know. The market's so weird. I have no idea.
And I mean, you could also look at it too. They could be holding on in terms of entertaining offers until after most of these top six wingers are off the market in free agency, because if you are a team that missed out on a guy that you were targeting, a guy that's capable of scoring 20 goals, maybe you then, circle back and look at a guy like DeBrusk, who I'm sure there's plenty of teams that, even if maybe, DeBrusk valued right now is not the greatest, can look at him and be like, all right, he's 24. He almost scored 30 goals in the season. He was on pace for over 20 goals, had COVID not hit in 2020. He's a guy that if we put him in our situation, change of scenery, could be a top 6 guy in our lineup. You know, there's value there. So they could be waiting for the kind of the free agency dust to settle and then, entertain offers once again. So I think there's value there, which would be another reason why it'd be tough if he's more or less just a pure, cap dump. But in terms of, priorities though, it's all about freeing up cap and getting Krejci back because, again, not to beat a dead horse, but if Krejci's not back, the whole outlook of the season takes a major hit.
Yeah, that's not good. So that's everything in the Bruins world. I think we kind of hit on everything. Goodbye Corrali. Hello, Thomas Nosek. Feels like Nosek's going to be a fourth liner. Halla, Foligno are going to be third liners. So we do know that. Around the league, what stood out to you? What was the surprise? What piqued your curiosity? What'd you like? What'd you not like?
Yeah, I think probably it's more what I didn't like of like how many teams were throwing out crazy contracts. It's crazy how you look at last offseason, how hesitant teams were to spend, especially in the flat cap, and people were very cognizant about that. Didn't look like it this year. I mean, people were throwing out crazy money and again, like I understand you're paying up for Hamilton or what have you, but even, Coleman to a 6-year contract, which Bruins were supposed to be in on him, but
that was the one bullet dodge. I will give Sweeney
Yeah.
credit. I'm glad that didn't happen. That would have been like reminiscent of the Backus deal.
But you look at just, like Suter for a 4-year deal. Zach Hyman gets I think 7-year contract.
Cody Ceci got 4 years.
Yeah. The Kraken, who didn't make any deals during the expansion draft and, signed Chris Dreiger, like gets Grubauer now. Like it seems like people we're spending a lot more freely than I thought they would, especially considering we're still in this flat cap era. And there's no guarantee yet that it's going to be increased next year. I think in the coming years, it's inevitable that the cap rises once again, once you've got that ESPN and Turner deal kicking in, once you got Seattle doing well, once we go back to the pre-pandemic, level of revenue. But it's not a guarantee it's going to be by next offseason. So the fact that so many teams are spending at this level, kind of surprising. And I don't think there's any real like winners. Like there wasn't a team that I think you look at how they handled the first day of free agency, like teams setting themselves up for a run. Maybe Colorado getting Kemper, but even then, like that cost to get him was pretty heavy, right? Like that did not go according to I think their plan of what they were hoping was going to happen when they had to do this kind of panic trade for a guy like Grubauer, a guy like Kemper. So,
well, LeBrun was saying that their plan A was obviously re-signing Grubauer. Their plan B was signing Freddie Anderson. Plan C was trading for Kemper. So they were up against the wall.
Yeah. So, I look at it, the teams that are still good are still going to be there, like Colorado, even if they had to do a little bit of a panic move to get a goaltending, still have a lot of the usual suspects back there. They're still going to be good. They locked up McCarr. They got Landeskog. They got all those guys. Tampa, even, people think Tampa, even though they lost their entire third line, they're still going to be good. They're still going to be very good. They still have Andre Val, even without their top 6. And they also re-signed Brayden Point, who is a monster. Like
deserves it.
Yeah. They would still be a legit contender, even if they didn't have that top 6, because Vasilevsky and that defense is still as good as it is, right? They're still going to be a very, very good team. So, honestly, the team that I think came out of this whole offseason right now looking pretty good is Arizona, of being cognizant of the fact that they suck and they have a lot of work to do. So they just took on all these shitty contracts, and I think they've got 7 picks in the first 2 rounds next year. Like
they do.
That's an actual good rebuilding effort from Armstrong coming in there and fixing what was a mess. So that's one team that are they going to be good? Hell no. But in terms of actually ripping the Band-Aid off and really retooling and rebuilding in what should be 2 pretty promising drafts, they did pretty well for themselves, especially considering they got dipshit Vancouver to take the OEL contract, which
and to get the 9th overall
pick. Exactly. Yeah. So sucks the Bruins didn't get Gallon, because I think he would have been fantastic, addition, but not worth it for that OEL contract. That Jim Benning trying to over in Vancouver trying to say, change of scenery is going to fix what has been a replacement level production from OEL for that contract is embarrassing. Like that Vancouver team is so screwed, man. Like there was a lot of, we're not even talking about Carolina, how they handled not just the Tony DeAngelo shit, but they're, deciding again to be exposed the cheap owners that they are with getting rid of Nedeljkovic and, going with, the team that people were so high on, now that they're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel and trying to save money. Chicago giving Seth Jones that horrible contract and trying to now build a contender like in the middle of what should be a rebuild. They should have blown it up years ago. The fact that they're now like tried to blow it up one year, being like, "Oh, this sucks. Let's just spend a shit ton of money again." There's a lot of teams that, as much as I think maybe Bruins fans are disappointed that the offseason maybe hasn't been as lofty as they expected. Good God, there's a lot of teams that had some shitty weeks the last couple of weeks.
Oh, and I mean, look, I look at the Blackhawks, look at that Seth Jones deal. There's obviously that, but I mean, just trying to run it back. It's like, what are you doing? Like, just rebuild. I didn't understand that, like what are you doing? I mean, Taves is on the verge of retiring. So you just have Patrick Kane and you're building your whole team around Patrick Kane. I don't get it. I don't get it. And then, the Tony D scenario, the situation in Carolina, makes no sense from a real life standpoint. From a cheap owner's perspective, you basically trade Dougie's $9 million a year for Tony D and his $1 million a year, hoping that you get like half the production. I guess I can see it from that angle, but that's a terrible person and not someone you want in your locker room or representing your organization. They kept trying to yesterday or Wednesday, trying to justify he's become a better person and that, he's changed. Of course, there's no examples of that. And everyone kind of just looks at that and laughs. But the real reason is they wanted to save money. They wanted to save the $8 million on a right shot, puck moving defenseman. That's the reason. They looked at his stats from 2 years ago, saw he had 53 points and said, well, we can do that and save money. And that's the reason. That's the real reason. It doesn't care that he's, racist or any of those things. It's just, he saves money. That's it. That's the reason. They're a hockey team at the end of the day. People forget. But that's NHL free agency. Might continue. I just got a notification that Brandon Saad is going to St. Louis and Corey Perry is going to the Lightning. So can't beat him.
The Marion Hossa experience.
Next year, that basically locks in that the Canadians are going to win the Stanley Cup next year.
Yes.
Anyways, before we go, Conor, what can the people look forward to over at BSJ?
Yeah, obviously a whole bunch of news to break down over the last couple of days. I'm sure there'll be more news to drop in the coming days where I think there's still a lot more shoes to drop in terms of the Bruins offseason. So we'll have all the updates, breakdowns, all that good stuff over at BSJ. So subscribe to BostonSportsJournal.com. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at ConorRyan_93.
Go do all of that. For CLNS Media, I'm Marinofsky. That's Conor Ryan. You Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest every day.